Welcome to another live episode of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I am your host, WIZE. I have a very special guest. He's a fellow podcaster and author. Welcome to the show, Brent Cassity.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate that.
Awesome.
Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show.
That's a cool intro you have, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That's my man Cole Johnson. He
Yeah.
actually made that intro for me. Yeah, he's
Very
awesome.
cool. Very cool.
Let me silent this. I forgot that.
In 97, people see me coming.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Is that me? See me coming?
No, it was some short I was watching, but yeah. But okay, so Brent. Okay, you have a very interesting story. And
Yeah.
when I was looking at your profile, I was like, oh, he would be a great great guest to have because you've been through a lot. And let's start with all right, let's start with the big thing, man. You served some time in prison.
Yeah. Went to prison. Sentenced to 5 years at Leavenworth. That's not fun. Not fun.
I feel I understand because my nephew he served some time in prison, and I told him you were going to be a guest on,
Yeah.
and I told him where you served time, and he was like, "Oh no, that's a max." He said, I wasn't there. He said I wasn't there. I was in light prison. That was max.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky enough, Will, not to be in the max. They process everybody through that building that was built in 1879 that looks like Shawshank Redemption, and when they prisonize you, when you get brought through those gates, they put you in a cell, and you have no idea if they really know that you're not supposed to be there, and then they let you sit there for like 4 or 5 hours while all you're doing is thinking, I wonder if they know I'm not supposed to be in this big one. And you don't know. And you know what? The other thing that you find out is that it really wouldn't matter because who would you tell? Because what are you going to say? I'm not supposed to be here. And they're going to say, yeah, everybody says that.
Yeah, that's what everyone says. And then they're not guilty.
Exactly. Nobody's guilty. Everybody's a professional athlete. Everybody's a millionaire in prison.
Yeah. So yeah, when I told him that, he was like, yeah, I was in light prison. He's like, that's max. And I was like, oh, okay. He said, yeah.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is that Leavenworth, they have a whole campus there. They got the 1879 prison max. Now it's a medium because they whenever they had that big storm down in New Orleans, they had to overnight change some of the prisons, the federal prisons in the United States, and so overnight it went from a max to a medium. I was at the camp there down the hill, and I think in 1990 they were trying to get it to get pushed into a low, and they put all the ugly fences around and the barbed wire and everything else, but they just left it and it stayed a camp. So I think it's one of the 3 federal camps in the United States that has a fence around it. Makes it a little bit more intimidating for people to come visit you.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write the book?
Well, I had a lot of long walks along that fence, and I started thinking to myself, well, wow, this is rock bottom. This is as low as I've gone. What do I do with this? And I started thinking about how can I use this? Could I use the journey that I'm on, have been on, and help other people possibly get unstuck, possibly, feel like that they could get to a second chance, a second step. My big thing is I think everybody, whether they've gone to prison or not, they build up prisons in their own mind. And, that could be bad childhood, parents get a divorce, bad marriage, bad job, bad health crisis, whatever those things are. Those experiences tend to limit us from being willing to step into, even if if it's good or bad, people are fearful to step into the unknown. And you see in prison, people getting institutionalized to where they have this ugly routine. They walk the same time every day, they work out at the same time, they go to their job at the same time, they shower at the same time, sit in the same spot, all those things that you do to feel like you have control of something in prison. But what you really I find fascinating is that see a lot of guys when they get close to the door or they get close to freedom, um, they'll catch another charge. They'll put hands on a guard or to do something. And I think the reason why is that they've become so comfortable in this ugly environment, this ugly routine, that freedom becomes more unfamiliar to them. And they would rather stay in a routine they know than a routine that's going to be new to them. And as I got out of prison, I started recognizing that that's not just in prison. That's just something that people live in all the time. The people who make New Year's resolutions. There's 330 million people in the United States, roughly. About 65% of those people say they're going to do something, improve themselves, make themselves proud of themselves, do something new. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to go for that job promotion. I'm going to do whatever that is. 25% drop off in the first week. You know how many drop off after the first month? After the January's over, we lose 46% of those people. And there's only 8% that make it to the end of the year. And I think that's for a lot of reasons. I think just, you're trying to lose 20 pounds, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. All right. I'm gonna wake up an hour early and work out. Now I'm sore. I don't know if I want to do that. And what happens is that people don't stay with it long enough. They say, I'm good. I'll just stay with what I'm doing. Even though they don't really like what they're doing, it's easier. And the known is so much more comfortable than the unknown. And it's the unknown. And that's why I use the term nightmare success, is that people will say, well, Brent, those two words don't go together. You know that, right? That's a weird thing you've done there. But it's always together. Whether you know it or not, anything you go to do that you want to get to set yourself free to your own success, you're going to have to walk through the stuff that you're scared of, the stuff that makes you nervous. And you got to go over it, under, around it, through it, whatever that is. You got to figure out mindset wise that you're going to do that. And you will get there if you just keep stepping. You keep walking. You take that first step and you're like, well, I'm started. Take a second step, well, this isn't as bad as I thought. And your third step, you're kind of getting it. You're in a different type of routine now, and you're getting confidence. And that's what people don't give themselves a chance with. They'll start it, but they won't stay with it.
And prime example is me and my podcast. It took me a while to really get started until I finally decided to press record and release it. And then the second one was a little bit longer than the first one, then a little bit longer after that, then a little bit long. And then after a while, I just got comfortable, and it was like, I got this. I can do this. And so my goal was to get past 10 episodes, because that was the dreaded mark where a lot of people just drop off.
That's where the graveyard is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I gotta, once I get past 10, so I'm like, I got to 20. I'm like, all right, I'm good. I can keep going. And now I'm at 176 as far as my audio, as far as my audio goes. And so it was like, oh man, this is not, it's not easy. It's like so much. I love doing it so much that when I'm working and I'm editing and I'm doing what I'm doing, I don't consider it work. It's just me doing what I love, and which is podcasting. Yeah.
It's your passion. And that, that's what got me into, I wrote a book, but to tell you the truth, my passion was, when I first started, I thought, well, I was on other podcasts. I was promoting, I would go on the radio and promoting the book. And one night I was walking the dogs with my wife, Julie, and I said, I think I'm going to do a podcast. And she said, really? What are you going to do on your podcast? I said, well, I've got like 50 guys from Leavenworth that are on my Facebook. I think I'm going to talk to them about life before prison, life in prison, life out of prison. How did they get through it? What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? I think there's stories there that can be told that people could identify with, not having to go to prison. But what do you do when you're up against it? What do you do in a dark spot? What strategies do you use to get through that? How do you get through it? Or do you stay, where you are? I was talking to somebody the other night. Well, and one of my biggest fears in life is being, rocking on my rocking chair at 85 years old and saying, man, I wish I would have done that. Back when I was in my 30s, I wish I would have done that, or my 40s or 50s or whatever that is. And wish I would have gotten into the game. Wish I would have gotten out on the field. And instead I watched. And that's, to me, that's the greatest regret. So my thought of everything that I've been through is there's no time to waste. You just, take the action, go with it, figure it out, adapt. Because one of the things you figure out when you go to prison is you can pretty much adapt to anything. I went from being a wealthy man to having a plastic chair, a locker, and a bunk bed. And my thing on that is that crazy enough is that nothing is as bad as your mind makes it out to be, ever. Not even prison. I remember standing at the gates of Leavenworth, and I knew that everything behind me was everything I loved, everything I knew, and everything in front of me. From what I'd seen on TV, hell, I didn't even know if I was going to live. And what I found out is that you can survive. In fact, I found that there was a lot of good people in there that wanted to help me transition and be helpful. And you don't see that a lot on TV.
No, of course, on TV they're gonna promote the violence and promote everything else, and not show some of the aspects that you're talking about, where there are some people there that are trying to change lives, that are trying to
Yeah,
impact lives in a positive way, and help these prisoners rehab.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a and if you for me, the thing is that there's definitely bad apples, but there's bad apples everywhere.
Yeah,
But in the environment that I was in, within about an hour of me being in a world, once they got me down to where I was supposed to be and got me to my bunk bed, and I met my bunkmate, I met a guy that I probably would have never have met. He was this little Hispanic guy, a boxer. He'd been in prison a long time, and Romo said, "Man, Cass, you don't look like you've ever been here before. You're going to need a lot of help." And he immediately said, "Hey, you can't put anything in that locker. It's filthy. We got to clean that out." He said, "You've got to make these beds military style because the warden comes through every Friday for a bed check. And I'm going to show you how to do that." We did that. And he walks me across and he says, "I want you to meet Clark. Clark, meet Cassity. That you guys are the same." So Clark helped him out. And within that time period there, I thought, wow, these guys are really helping me. Within the hour of being in that world, the big unknown world. And I remember I got to make a phone call to my family, my wife and 3 daughters. And I said, "I'm going to be okay. Don't worry about me. I'll be okay. I got this." And, it's funny. It's one thing that I did find out of everything that had happened in my life is that you can pretty much adapt to anything. And there's two types of people in prison. There's the guys that are trying to get it right, trying to do their time in the best way they can. And then there's the guys that have given up. And I call those the victims and the survivors. The victim is the guy that's blaming everybody, and he's feeling sorry for himself. It takes all your energy away, your strength away. And those survivors, it kind of makes them stand up a little taller. It makes them feel like that they're, maybe they can win the day, and maybe they can find a way to make it and be better because they're walking through it. And that's the thing about that is, well, is that, you know, you see these movies like Shawshank Redemption, and they throw those things out there. And I watch that now and I think, gosh, there's so many life lessons in that movie. And, you know, one of them's get busy living or get busy dying. The other thing that Morgan Freeman says that I think is really deep is he tells Andy when he first comes in, he says, you know, when you first look at these walls, when you're here, they're here to keep you in. And he said, with the longer you're here, they're the arms that give you comfort. And that's what you got to kind of stay away from in prison is you can't let that become your comfort of getting into that world so much that you don't realize that you can be out here and make things happen. But strangely enough, like going back to what we were saying, Will, is that people become institutionalized on the outside. They just can't quite get themselves to take that step into the unknown. And so they stay the whole time in this funk. You know, the ugly routine is the warden to their freedom. The ugly routine, because it is their comfort, becomes something that keeps them from doing whatever they were going to do with whatever talents that they have. And the mindset of that is, how do you break free from it?
And it's amazing because my nephew, he served 7.5 years, and when he came home, he was like, "I'm never going back." He says,
Yeah.
"I'm not." He says, He's written 2 books. He's a content creator. He's doing what he has to do. He has his own side business where he does property maintenance and stuff like that. And it was his goal to not go back to going back to prison. He was like, I'm gonna break this cycle because before that, it was my brother, his father, who had served almost half his life in prison.
Yeah.
And he was like, nah, this is not the example I want to set for my son. And he's changed his life around.
He'd be a good guy for the Nightmare Success Internet podcast.
Oh
That's
no,
what it's about.
I'll definitely link you up. He's he is my best friend. Come
Yeah.
on, he's my nephew, but he's older than me because I have his siblings are older than me.
Yeah.
So me and him are separated by a few years.
Like
And we
brothers.
grew up
Yeah.
together. Yeah, he's my brother. And so to see what he's been through, serving his time, and having to come back and get acclimated and really work hard at staying on the right path and building something that his son can be proud of him.
Yeah.
And so
You know what I
to
think is
me,
interesting about that too,
yes.
Will, is that you talking about his dad spending all that time in prison. I had what I would have thought was a very normal childhood. You know, lived in a nice neighborhood, kids riding bikes, you know, picking each other for teams, time to go in, you know, for dinner. It was like the Norman Rockwell thing in Southwest Missouri. And everything was normal except my dad went to prison. And it was such a weird thing for me because my dad, everybody's got things with their, you know, moms and dads. My dad was bigger than life to me. He was, it's from a small town, 3,000 people. He was valedictorian of his high school. He won the state championship in basketball, played D1 basketball, got out of there, went and graduated #1 in his law school, got out of there, won some big cases, and then he got into business and he was kind of the guy with the golden touch. And, you know, me being 14 years old at that time, I was 6'1" at that time. I was like a 7-footer, but I thought I was going to be like 6'4", 6'5", but I never was, never went to the NBA. But at that time I was like a 7-footer, but I was thinking, man, I want to be just like that guy. I want to be just like him. And he came home one night and said to my brother and I, he said, I got to talk to you guys. He took us in the family room and he said, boys, he said, I've gotten myself into a heap of trouble with the bank that I own. And I told them they could run the government and I run the bank. And he said, it's gone from bad to worse since then. And I think to get this behind us, I'm going to take the plea deal. Will, his mouth was moving, but I was like, wait a minute, how does the guy I'm idolized and a guy with a golden touch and all these things bigger than life is telling me that he's going to plead guilty, go to prison. And about the time that all came back and I started to hear his voice, he said, and to get a clean start, we're going to move from Springfield to St. Louis, Missouri. And I was like, oh man, this is like the worst family meeting I've ever had in my whole life. And, we moved to St. Louis. It was tough because, we moved, Dad went to prison. He didn't go for a long time. He went for 6 months, but when we moved in, it's kind of weird because, okay, the mom's married, the neighbors are coming over trying to be nice and welcome us into this neighborhood. And okay, she's not widowed. She's not divorced. Where's the dad? And we were like, what are we going to do? What are we going to say? And back then there wasn't Google, so that nobody would know. And so we just decided he's out of town working. And he was out of town about 2.5 hours down the road at Marion Prison. And we went with that. But, there's a couple of things I remember, though, Will, when I went to visit my dad in prison. I was 15 years old. One was driving there is like we came from kind of a wealthy environment. Now we were that family. We were going that weekend, every weekend, to visit my dad in prison. So we're that family now. And, my dad, he came out, he kind of wondered when somebody comes around the corner, are they going to be like a prison creature? Is he okay? He's going to have that uniform on. But he handled it really well, and he did okay. He was adjusting, and that made me feel good. But I remember when we left, walking out of there, I said, this will never happen to me. I'll never let this happen in my life. And Dad got out of prison. The one company that was saved out of everything is because he put it in a family trust, which was my mom, my brother, and me. And he began building again. And I couldn't have been more proud of him. And I ended up joining him in that business. And then, 40 years later, 35 years later, we're in this huge federal investigation that went on for 6 years. And I ended up at the gates of prison. And the really weird thing was he got a 10-year sentence. I got a 5-year sentence, and there were 4 other people involved in this conspiracy. And so I got out earlier. And I went back to that same prison that I'd been at 15 years old to visit my dad again, to watch him come around that same corner. But this time, I overly identified with the fact that I had a little PTSD because I knew where he was coming from around that corner because I had lived that life for the last 3 years. It was really something.
Wow. Yeah, I know how that feels. I know because my dad served time, and my mom used to take me, and I remember the bus rides and getting the change to get stuff in the vending machines and all, taking the pictures and all that. So I remember these things vividly.
I bet.
And that pushed me like I don't want to go to jail.
Yeah.
And thank God I haven't been to prison. I thank my blessings. But it can be. I can imagine it could be rough on a family.
Well, I think and you know this, Will, when somebody goes to prison, their whole family goes to prison. Everybody who's affected by that has to live with that and has to learn from it and really has to figure out how they're going to live their life around it. Because, when you're an ex-felon, it's permanent. I mean, you're tattooed on you for the rest of your life. I was really lucky because I met my wife in the neighborhood when she was 13, I was 15. And we've been through every life stage together. The good times. I mean, we had a vacation home, and the kids were in private schools, and you know, the company grew into 25 states, and we got recognized, in big media publications from Wall Street Journal to Forbes, Fortune. HBO did a documentary called The Young and the Dead that spawned into 6 Feet Under. So life was really good, really good. And I think that's also when life can hit you upside the head, blind side. And most people, when they go through that, would have been a death knell. But for Julie, she was right by my side. And I think the reason why our daughters got through it so well, and they do so well now, they're 30, 28, 25. But I think the reason why they got through it so well is because of her. She was just so strong. She was such a good role model, and they thought, yeah, mom can do it. We can do it. And they went from being privileged kids to working through college, and they made it. And I couldn't be prouder of them. They're just unreal as far as what they had, what they lost, and what they created. And it's a story of their own nightmare success on their own.
So yeah, the title of your book and your podcast makes a lot of sense. You went through a nightmare to get to the successful part of it. So the title is fitting to me.
It's once you explain it, I think it probably makes a little more sense.
I'm sure when you first read it, when people first read like the nightmare success, what is it? But
Oh,
after you hear the story and everything, you're like, oh, now it makes sense.
But it's and I think the other part of it too, well, is you do, for me, I some people say when you hit your rock bottom moment that's it. Most people think that, you hit rock bottom and there's no return. After I've been through what I've been through, I think that rock bottom can be a new beginning for you, and how you would attempt to take on things in life. I'll share this with you because it was my rock bottom moment. We'd fought for 6 years. It was awful. I can't, even to my worst enemy, I would never want them to go through that, because it's just a feeling of no control. You go to bed fighting, you wake up fighting, and it's like, you're put into this hole, and you think you can grab the sides, and the sides just keep spreading out, and you just keep falling deeper. And I remember my girls telling me, because one of the charges that I had, there was absolutely no way to get away from. It was the company was founded in 79. 1994, they passed a law that you couldn't allow an ex-felon to work in the business of insurance. And one of our companies was an insurance company, and the way the company was set up, I owned it. And my dad was an ex-felon. Did I have intent to break that law? No, but I was in a position that I should have known the law. And that carried a 5-year sentence. And then once you get thrown into that conspiracy of the business is wrong, every piece of mail that you mail out is mail fraud. Every wire that you make is wire fraud. Anything you buy with those dollars to expand your company is money laundering. And then they stack those. They carry 10, 20 years, each one of them. When I, one night, was just being, I don't know what I was thinking. I decided to add up all the stacked charges. I was looking at 975 years. So you take that and you think, well, I could beat, I don't know, I could beat 40 of those, but 1 or 2 of those charges put you away for 40 years. And we had a family meeting with my daughters, my wife, and my girls were teenagers at that time. They said, Dad, there's no way that you can go to trial. Absolutely, we could lose you forever. And I knew that, and I was worn out too. Well, at that time, we'd lost everything, and the idea of going to trial seemed like trying to eat an elephant. And um, but I do remember this: the night, and when you get close to trial, they start throwing out the plea bargains and the different things because they don't go to trial either. Um, so I remember the night before I was supposed to go down and plead guilty. My kids and my wife were up at our vacation home, and we had a family call. It was my dad, my mom, my brother, me, and Julie. Mostly just trying to organize. How are the kids going to be taken care of, and what are we going to do about college and all these different things. And um, I got off the phone that night. I was by myself, drinking. Well, both those things probably aren't good right before you go down to plead guilty at a federal courthouse, but um, it was the first time it hit me, Will, that, man, I've been fighting all this time, these 6 years, and I hadn't even contemplated what am I going to do? I'm going to be a felon. I'm going to go to prison, and then I'm going to be an ex-felon. Like, how do I live as an ex-felon? How do I even want to live as an ex-felon? And I started thinking about, Julie had been so great through all of it. The girls had been so great. I mean, does she need a fresh start? Does the kids, can they live with the stain of a dad being an ex-felon? And I had another drink, and I really hit and I started to feel really sorry for myself. Why me? Why this? Why did this happen? And I actually got out a sheet of paper and I started writing, how Julie, what a wonderful wife she'd been, and what a great support. And she needed a fresh start. And the girls, all the fatherly advice that I would give them going forward, and all the friends that had been supportive. And I had another drink, and I thought maybe I just exit stage left on this thing. And I grabbed the keys, and I went to the garage, and I turned on the car, and I didn't know if I was going to go hit a tree or if I was just going to let the car run. And the hair stands up on my arms when I tell this, because it's like something hit me, well, like a lightning bolt. It's like, my God, Brent, what the hell are you doing? You're the glass half full guy. You're the guy that looks for the solutions. Your kids, your wife, what a terrible legacy of quitting and being known for that. And it was like the first moment that I really understood the difference between the victim and the survivor. That being the victim takes away all your strength. It takes away everything that you are, and you basically curl up in a fetal position. Whereas if you're surviving, you feel different. Just saying that, it makes you feel different. And I said to myself at that moment, rock bottom moment, whatever goes on from here, and it wasn't good. Nothing was good. I was going to go plead guilty. I didn't know where I was going to go to prison, but I knew I was going to go to prison. All those unknowns. But I said, I'm going to be a survivor through this, and I'm going to make my family proud, regardless of what it is I have to step through. I'm going to let them know that I can be someone that they can look to, that he's handling it the right way. And from that moment on, it was different. I wasn't standing in prison yet, but I had already come to grips with the fact that the rest from here on out, I'm stepping. I'm going to step through this. I'm going to make whatever I can out of this. And I've done it all my life. And I got another gear, I can do it again. And that's kind of how I went into prison, with that mindset. And it helps. It steadied me.
And like I said, you have a powerful story. Just like you said, like there's certain circumstances. Like even with my situation, I could have easily just given up on life, and like you, I kind of sort of went down the path of drinking and stuff like that. Until one day, like you said, it hit me like, you can't be doing this. You need to change your life around. This is not your purpose. I understand you feel like the world is against you, but you need to change your ways. and I did, and it's crazy that so you don't people don't understand when you're in that mindset where you just feel like everything's against you, the world is against you, everything's just falling apart, and you're like, man, they might just be better off without me.
Mhm. That's a
And
dark place. I
it
mean,
is,
it's
it
a
is.
crazy dark place because all logic's out the window. That's
Mm-hmm.
a temporary solution to a permanent, or a permanent solution to a temporary
Temper,
situation,
yeah,
and that's, you know, the I guess when we got down to this, what you and I are talking about, there's just like one or two ways to go with it. You know, you either say I'm made for something better than this, I can make this work, or you fall further down into it.
yeah. And in our case, we decided to pick ourselves up, and now I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed. My life is turned around now. I have a beautiful wife, good career. I have a podcast that's doing very well. I've been making some amazing connections with the networks that I'm building with through podcasting, and I'm actually getting to meet people that are doing what I want to do. So now I'm able to lean on them and ask them questions and learn from them. And so one thing you talk about a lot is mindset,
Hmm.
and people don't realize that you can change your mindset. It's
Yeah.
going to take work, but you can change your mindset.
Well, I think one of the things that you're talking about there too is that it's people, places, and things. If you are your environment, you you can choose to be around people, places, and things that where you want to be. And one of the things that you just said, Will, is that you start asking questions and curious, and how do you do that? I used 5 different tools in prison that really helped me, and there were some of these things were things that I used when I was trying to build a company. But what you just said there reminded me of that is you got to humble yourself. If you want to get better, you got to humble yourself because you got to look around, see who's getting it right, and then go and talk to them about that. Because it's amazing how those people will share with you how they're getting it right because they're kind of proud of it themselves. And they'll share it back to you. And that is almost like getting the answers to the test before the test. And you have the confidence then to know that this works because those people are doing it. You just have to implement it into your life. And well, if I would read something when I was growing a company as a 20 something kid trying to grow a national company, I'd read something, I'd call them up and say, hey, I really like what you're doing with this. How do you do that? And it was shocking to me that these guys would actually talk and they wanted to help because they were kind of like, yeah, not too many people ask me what I do and how I do it. But that was a big one. Walking into prison, you look a lot more than you say and figure out, hey, that guy's got a good prison job. I wonder how he got that. That guy's got a great workout routine. That guy's reading a book that I'd like to read. How do they do this? How did I want to do my time the way they're doing their time? And it's not any different when you get out into the real world. Who's doing it the way you want to do it? Who's getting it right the way you want it? And talk to them about it. And then you can implement those things into your world. Um, the other thing that I thought, I talk to people about this all the time, is finding your Zewantaneo. That goes back to the Shawshank movie, but Andy Dufresne is wrongly accused of murder, of killing his wife. He gets life in prison, but he literally chips on a wall for 19 years to get to his freedom. And what fuels him is when he talks about Zihuatanejo. Zihuatanejo is a place down in Mexico. He talks about it as being the widest of the white sands, the bluest of the blue waters. He's going to fix up the old fishing boat so he can take his friends out. And the old inn that's on the beach there, his friends are going to drink and watch the sun go down. And you can see it, you can feel it when he talks about it. And he lets that wall out every day into the prison yard because he's got holes in his pockets to let that wall out. And that's his daily victory, is staying on plan. And everybody needs that. Whatever your Zewantaneo is, what is that thing that fuels you to get up in the morning and say, yes? What is that thing that would actually make you chip away at a wall for 19 years, knowing that at the other end of that thing is going to be my freedom, my everything, whatever that is. Find it, because if you find that, that is the thing that will actually let you step out of the unknown. That will be your fuel to knock down the walls over, under, around to get there, because otherwise you'll stay stuck. You don't have the fuel to get there. The third thing that I used was win the day, one day at a time. Life is unfair. Make a difference regardless. And my daughter made me a calendar every year, my youngest daughter, and it had the family pictures. And what I did was kind of like a mind hack, where I would write every night before I went to bed in that box, and my win for the day. What happened today? And you're thinking, well, gosh, nothing could happen getting in prison. Well, there is. I mean, maybe I got forklift certified at the food warehouse. Maybe I had a really good conversation with one of my daughters about their school or whatever they'd accomplished. There are wins in the day of creating your life. And if I had a bad day, because everybody has bad days, I'd let myself go all the way down, like feel it to my soul. But what I wouldn't allow is to put 2 boxes of bad. Because if I put 2 boxes of bad, that was the thing I was the most afraid of. 2 boxes could turn into a week, month, year, and then I've lost myself. One day at a time was really important, because if you can win the day, one day at a time, you're not looking at 5 years. How am I going to get through this? You're looking at getting through where the present is. If you can get through the present, you can step into the next, and you continue to gain. You continue to gain confidence in that world. The fourth thing was a really big thing for me. It was learn from your mistakes. They don't define you, but they really make you wiser. And I think one of the things I see now, Will, is that so many people are so afraid to make mistakes. We got all this social media out here. Everybody's seeing the best vacation, the best party, the best restaurant. Everybody's living no mistakes. And it's not true. All the greatest kings of all the books you read, of all the great empires that have been built, all those guys made mistakes. What they do is they grow from the mistakes and they evolve. They make them stronger, they make them wiser, and then they get better. The one thing that I've always said is that how you handle a mistake will make you a winner or loser in life, because you either get stuck or unstuck by a mistake. But Jack Nicklaus has got a good quote where he says, just don't make the same mistake twice. Like, if you hit a bad shot on a hole, that's fine, but don't make another bad shot. It really messes up the hole. Just always know that 2 bad mistakes of the same kind, that's a problem. But if you make a mistake and you learn from it and you move on, you're going to be good, because, success isn't perfect. Success is action. Success is learning. Success is evolving. And the fifth thing for me probably scared me the most. It was don't give in, don't give up, keep being yourself regardless of the circumstances. Otherwise, you will lose what makes you you. What I was worried about going into prison and becoming prison Brent. I was going to lose Brent. And I constantly was on plan of, how do I get a good job? How do I eat this time? How do I do it the right way? And it helped me keep being me. Kept reading, my thing was, read as many books as you can. Get a good prison job, because that kills the day. Get in a good prison workout routine, because you don't want to come out of prison fat. I mean, I had all these things going on. And if you don't do those things, it's so easy to slip into that institutionalized mindset, and you just can't crawl out because you're all about can't. And whenever you get to that, if you start finding that word in your vocabulary, you know that you've gotten stuck because you've lost the imagination and the possibilities and the dreaming of making the step. And that goes all the way back to your Zay Montaneo. You got to find it, you got to feel it, you got to hold on to it because it is truly the fuel that's going to keep you in that weird, nervous, fearful, scary place that you step into to try to get where you're wanting to go.
Yeah, you have to make yourself uncomfortable. That is definitely something that you have to do. That's I know I stepped out of my comfort zone by doing my podcast and stuff like that because it's not something I had done before,
Yeah.
and so to really go and do it and at first it was funny because I would make up so many excuses like, oh man, that didn't sound right. Oh man, that sounded hideous on that one. Oh man, no, I can't. That I got to delete that. And then finally one day I just pressed record and didn't do nothing to it. I just uploaded it, and that's where it started. And after just doing the first one, it kind of like lifted a big weight off my shoulders. Because now I'm like, it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
People gonna think whatever they're gonna think or feel however they're gonna feel. And but it was up to me to really just keep going,
Take the
keep
lead.
doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
keep going and keep doing it. Because regardless of how bad I sounded or how bad the show was, the more I did the show, the more I improved. The more
Yes.
I wanted to make sure the sound was on point. Make sure prior to me even doing video, I just wanted to make sure my sound quality was on point. Where I would
Mm-hmm.
edit it, take out the ums, the ahs, take out the breaths, all of that. And then when I decided to go video, I was like, all right, let me make sure I get the right camera, have the right lighting, make sure I'm doing this correctly, I'm using the right platform because I wanted to make sure people was getting something very precious, giving people were giving me something very precious, which is their time
Mm-hmm.
by listening to my podcast and by watching it. So I just felt that I needed to give them the best quality of me, and so I just invested in myself.
So many people don't do that. They'll invest in other things, but they don't think to invest in themselves. And that's the thing you need to have on the right track so that you can make everything else work.
Yeah, absolutely. Brent, man, this has been amazing. I've had a great time talking to you. Now it's time where you get the solo screen and you get to plug away.
Well, for those out there looking for another great podcast, if you like listening to this one, um, check out Nightmare Success In and Out. It's all about what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt? How do you survive? Check out my book, Nightmare Success, uh, Loyalty, Betrayal, Life Behind Bars, Adapting, Finally Breaking Free. And I'm easy to find. Uh, Go to brentcassity.com. I spelled Cassidy wrong. It's spelled with a TY instead of a DY, even though I would have loved to have been Sean and David's brother. But brentcassity.com, I love getting all the messages and feedback from my website. You can find me at Brent Cassity, at Brent Cassity on Instagram, Facebook, Brent Cassity. And I just started doing TikTok. So my girls think that's funny that I'm doing that, but it's an interesting platform that I thought, well, let's go ahead and put it out there. So that's where you can find Brent Cassity and all that I do.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I can't lie. I just started doing TikToks myself, but it's a tool that you can use. It's a
It
tool to
is.
use to use to help build up an audience for your podcast because you can actually build up a big following on TikTok if
Yeah.
you're consistent with it.
You got to be
And I'm
consistent with it.
learning that, and I'm learning that short. I'm slowly, but the more consistent I'm with it, the more my audience is growing. More people are following me. So it's if you use them tools properly, it will help drive people to the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I just turned 56. I mean, for everybody who's in their teens and 20s, it's like second nature. They don't even think about it.
Yeah.
For me, I've got to figure
But
out, like, well, how
once
does
you
this
get
work?
once you get a little bit older, it's kind of like you kind of hesitate to, because it's like you have no fear when you're younger. I
No
guess,
fear.
yeah, no fear. So if we can go back to that, of that way of not being afraid,
Yeah,
it would definitely help us.
be awesome. Just put yourself in a time machine.
Yeah, but don't leave just yet. I'm gonna close out the show with my shout outs, but I want to chat with you a little bit off the air.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. Well, I appreciate it.
Oh no, the pleasure's all mine, man. This has been great. Thank you for sharing your story. And I'm definitely gonna link you and my nephew up. He'll
Absolutely. I'd love to talk to him. It'd be a
I'll
great
definitely set
interview.
I'll definitely set that up. But thank you once again for being a guest.
I appreciate it.
All right, so now it is time for shout outs. Big shout out to my Real Wise fam, Poppy J, Brandy J. Love you guys. Big shout out to the boss lady Fina. Love you and appreciate you, baby. Big shout out to our guest, Brent Cassity, for coming through and sharing this story. It's a very impactful story. So hopefully people out there can learn from it and really take his story and run with it, because it's a very impactful story. And as always, a big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless y'all. Be safe. You know your boy Wise does it. Peace out.